Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's story. Your likes and subscriptions can give me hope to create better stories and let me know what changes you'd like me to make to my voice. All right, now let's get to tonight's story. There lived a goddess whose wisdom flowed like honey from the comb, sweet and golden in the morning light. Her name was Athena, and she dwelt in a realm where olive trees grew tall and silver-leafed, their branches swaying gently in breezes that carried the scent of lavender and rosemary across rolling hills that stretched beyond the horizon. The sacred grove where Athena made her home was a place of profound tranquility. Ancient olive trees, some so old their trunks had grown wide enough for 3 people to embrace them with outstretched arms, created a natural cathedral with their interwoven branches. Dappled sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating patterns of light and shadow that danced slowly across the moss-covered ground. The air itself seemed to hum with a gentle energy, as if the very atoms were vibrating in harmony with some cosmic rhythm that brought peace to all who entered this sanctuary. Between the olive trees grew wild herbs that released their fragrant oils into the warm air. Chamomile flowers nodded their white and yellow heads in the gentle breeze, while patches of wild mint sent cooling scents across the grove whenever the wind stirred their leaves. Lavender bushes lined natural pathways that wound between the trees, their purple spikes attracting drowsy bees that moved lazily from flower to flower, their gentle buzzing adding to the symphony of peace that pervaded this sacred space. At the heart of the grove stood a spring of the clearest water imaginable. It bubbled up from deep within the earth, its source a mystery even to Athena herself. The water was so pure, it seemed to capture and reflect not just the light of the sun and moon, but something deeper, the very essence of clarity and wisdom. The spring formed a small pool, perfectly circular, its edges lined with smooth, white stones that had been worn to a gentle roundness by countless years of the water's tender caress. Athena herself moved through this grove with a grace that seemed to make the very air around her shimmer with possibility. She was neither young nor old in the way mortals measure such things, but possessed a timeless quality that spoke of eons of accumulated wisdom and understanding. Her hair fell in gentle waves, the color of autumn wheat touched by morning frost, and her eyes held the deep gray blue of storm clouds that promise refreshing rain. When she walked, her feet seemed to barely touch the ground, and flowers bloomed more brightly in her wake, as if her presence alone was enough to encourage all living things to flourish. The goddess wore robes that flowed around her like liquid moonlight, shifting from silver to pale gold as she moved through the dappled sunlight of the grove. The fabric seemed to be woven from something finer than silk, perhaps from the dreams of sleeping children, or the whispered hopes of those who sought wisdom in quiet moments. Around her shoulders, she wore a cloak that appeared to be made from the softest owl feathers, each one a perfect silver gray that caught and reflected light in the most subtle and beautiful way. But it was not Athena's appearance that made her presence so remarkable. It was the deep sense of peace and understanding that emanated from her very being. to be near her was to feel one's racing thoughts slow to a gentle rhythm, to feel the tension in one's shoulders melt away, like morning mist touched by the first rays of sun. Her voice, when she spoke, was like the sound of wind through wheat fields, or water flowing over smooth stones, carrying with it a quality that made listeners feel both deeply relaxed and wonderfully alert at the same time. On this particular day, as golden afternoon light slanted through the olive leaves and cast everything in a warm, honey-colored glow, Athena sat beside her sacred spring, watching the gentle play of light on the water's surface. She was contemplating the ancient city that lay beyond the hills, a place where humans had learned to build with stone and organize themselves into communities. This city, which would one day be known as Athens in her honor, was still young in the grand sweep of history, its people just beginning to discover the power of working together, of sharing knowledge, and of creating beauty that would endure through the ages. The early Athenians were like children taking their first steps, Athena mused as she watched a family of rabbits hop peacefully through the grove, completely unafraid in this sanctuary of wisdom. These humans showed such promise, such curiosity about the world around them. They had learned to cultivate the olive tree, that most sacred of plants, pressing its fruit to create oil that lit their lamps and nourished their bodies. They had discovered the art of pottery, shaping clay into vessels both beautiful and useful. Most importantly, they were beginning to understand that knowledge shared was knowledge multiplied, that wisdom grew stronger when it was passed from one person to another, like a flame touching a candle. As Athena sat in peaceful contemplation, the sound of approaching footsteps caused her to turn her attention toward the edge of the grove. But these were not the heavy, hurried steps of someone in distress or urgent need. Instead, they had the slow, wandering rhythm of someone who had discovered something beautiful and was approaching with reverence and care. The footsteps belonged to a young woman named Sophia, whose name meant wisdom in the ancient tongue, though she herself felt anything but wise. Sophia had been walking in the hills beyond the city, seeking solitude after a day filled with the noise and bustle of the marketplace. She was a weaver by trade, her fingers skilled at the loom, her eye keen for patterns and colors that would create cloth of exceptional beauty. But today, her mind had been troubled by questions that seemed to have no easy answers. The people of her city were arguing about how to govern themselves, how to make decisions that would benefit everyone rather than just a few. Some wanted one person to rule over all the others, while others insisted that every citizen should have a voice in important matters. The arguments had grown heated, and Sophia found herself wondering if there was a better way, a path that honored both the need for strong leadership and the wisdom that could come from many minds working together. She had walked into the hills seeking clarity, not really expecting to find answers, but hoping that the peaceful landscape might calm her troubled thoughts, enough for sleep to come easily when night fell. As Sophia approached the grove, she felt something she had never experienced before. The very air around her seemed to grow softer, more welcoming. The scent of lavender and chamomile grew stronger, and she noticed that her breathing which had been quick and shallow from the walk up the hillside, was naturally deepening and slowing. Her shoulders, which she only now realized had been hunched with tension, began to relax as if invisible hands were gently massaging away the knots of worry. When she reached the edge of the grove and saw Athena sitting beside the spring, Sophia felt no surprise, though she had never seen anyone quite like this graceful figure. It was as if some part of her had been expecting this meeting, as if she had been unconsciously drawn to this place by a wisdom deeper than her conscious mind. She paused at the edge of the grove, uncertain whether she should approach or quietly withdraw, not wanting to disturb what was clearly a sacred space. Athena looked up from the spring and smiled, an expression so warm and welcoming that Sophia felt the last of her nervousness melt away like snow in spring sunshine. "Come," the goddess said, her voice carrying easily across the grove, though she spoke no louder than one might use in gentle conversation. "The spring's wisdom is meant to be shared, and your questions deserve thoughtful consideration." Sophia found herself walking forward without conscious decision, her feet seeming to know the way along the herb-lined path. As she drew closer to Athena, she felt her mind growing clearer and calmer than it had been in weeks. The worries that had seemed so overwhelming just moments before now appeared manageable, worthy of attention, but not capable of stealing her peace. "I am Athena," the goddess said as Sophia settled herself on the soft grass beside the spring. "And you are Sophia, the weaver whose patterns speak of harmony, even when your thoughts are tangled with questions about how people might live together in wisdom." Sophia nodded, not questioning how Athena knew her name or her profession. In this place, such mysteries seemed as natural as the gentle sound of water flowing over stones. "I have been thinking about governance," she said, her voice automatically taking on the same peaceful tone as Athena's. "About how a city of people might make decisions together without falling into chaos or allowing a single voice to drown out all others." Athena's eyes sparkled with interest and approval. "Ah," she said, "you have discovered one of the great questions that humans will wrestle with for many centuries to come. Tell me, what have you observed in your city that makes you think these thoughts?" As Sophia began to speak, describing the arguments she had witnessed and the different opinions she had heard, she found that her words came more easily than they ever had before. The sacred spring seemed to reflect not just her image, but her thoughts, helping her to see them more clearly. Athena listened with complete attention, never interrupting, but occasionally nodding or making soft sounds of understanding that encouraged Sophia to continue. "Some say that one person should make all important decisions," Sophia explained, "because too many voices create confusion and delay. They point to the success of strong kings in other cities, how quickly they can respond to threats or opportunities." "And what do you think of this perspective?" Athena asked gently. Sophia was quiet for a moment, watching the patterns of light on the water's surface. "It seems efficient," she said slowly, "but I have noticed that even the wisest person cannot know everything. My own work at the loom has taught me that sometimes I cannot see a flaw in a pattern until my friend looks at it with fresh eyes. How much more complex are the patterns of governing a city? Athena smiled. A beautiful observation. And what of the other view that every citizen should have an equal voice? That seems fairer, Sophia replied, and I believe it honors the wisdom that lives in each person. But I have also seen how difficult it can be for many people to agree on anything, especially when emotions run high. Sometimes the loudest voices are not the wisest ones. The goddess nodded slowly, her expression showing deep approval of Sophia's thoughtful analysis. You see clearly, young weaver. Now, let me share with you a vision of what your city might become, a dream that lives in the realm of possibility. As Athena spoke, the air around them seemed to shimmer slightly, and Sophia found herself seeing images in her mind as clearly as if they were reflected in the spring's clear water. She saw her city in the future, grown larger and more beautiful, with white marble buildings that caught and reflected the Mediterranean sun. But more than the physical beauty, she could sense something else, a feeling of harmony and purpose that permeated the community. In this future time, Athena explained, her voice taking on a dreamy quality that made Sophia's eyelids feel pleasantly heavy. Your people will discover a way of governing that balances the wisdom of many with the need for clear decision-making. They will call it democracy, from words meaning rule by the people. But it will be more subtle and sophisticated than simply letting everyone vote on everything. The vision continued to unfold in Sophia's mind like a tapestry being woven by invisible hands. She saw citizens gathering in a large outdoor space, seated on stone benches arranged in a semicircle around a speaking area. But these were not the chaotic arguments she had witnessed in the marketplace. Instead, there was order and respect, with people taking turns to speak while others listened carefully. They will learn, Athena continued, that democracy requires more than just voting. It requires education so that people can make informed decisions. It requires patience so that complex problems can be discussed thoroughly. It requires respect for others, even when disagreement is strong. And it requires wisdom to know when quick action is necessary and when careful deliberation is more important. Sophia watched in fascination as the vision showed her citizens who had learned to debate with passion, but without personal attacks, who could disagree strongly about policies while still treating each other with dignity and respect. She saw leaders who were chosen not because they promised easy answers, but because they demonstrated wisdom, integrity, and a genuine desire to serve the common good. But how will they learn these things? Sophia asked, her voice soft with wonder. How will they develop such wisdom and restraint? Athena's smile was warm and knowing. Through stories, she said. Through the wisdom of teachers and philosophers who will help them understand that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from understanding oneself. Through the practice of virtues like courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom, and through the gradual understanding that a community is strongest when every member has the opportunity to contribute their unique gifts. The vision began to fade, but its essence remained bright in Sophia's mind. She could see now that the arguments in her city were not signs of failure, but growing pains as her people learned to work together in new ways. The disagreements were opportunities to discover better solutions, chances to practice the difficult art of listening to different perspectives and finding common ground. "This vision you have shown me," Sophia said, "it feels both wonderful and impossibly difficult. How can people learn to be so wise and patient?" Athena reached over and gently touched the surface of the spring, causing ripples to spread outward in perfect circles. "Wisdom grows slowly," she said, "like the olive tree that produces fruit only after many years of patient tending. But each generation can build upon the knowledge of those who came before, adding their own insights and understanding." As they talked, the sun continued its slow journey across the sky, and the light in the grove grew softer and more golden. Sophia found that her earlier agitation had completely disappeared, replaced by a deep sense of peace and purpose. The questions that had seemed so urgent and troubling now appeared as interesting puzzles to be solved gradually, with patience and care. "Your city will face many challenges," Athena said as the first evening stars began to appear between the olive leaves. "There will be times when democracy seems too slow or too chaotic, when people will be tempted to give up their voices in exchange for the promise of simple answers. But if they remember that wisdom is more valuable than speed, that justice is more important than convenience, they will find their way." Sophia nodded, feeling deeply grateful for this unexpected encounter and the wisdom it had brought. "How can I help my people?" "Through your weaving," Athena replied, and Sophia looked surprised. "Yes, your craft holds more power than you know. The patterns you create can tell stories, can teach lessons about harmony and balance. When people see how individual threads must work together to create something beautiful and strong, they begin to understand how individual citizens must work together to create a just and peaceful community." The goddess rose gracefully from her place beside the spring, and Sophia felt that this magical conversation was drawing to a close. But rather than sadness, she felt a deep contentment, as if she had received exactly what she needed. "I will remember," Sophia said, also rising. "I will weave patterns that remind people of these truths, and I will share what I have learned here today." Athena smiled and placed a gentle hand on Sophia's shoulder. "Sleep well tonight, young weaver. Let your dreams be filled with visions of the beautiful community your people will build together, thread by careful thread, decision by thoughtful decision." As Sophia made her way back down the hillside toward the city, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. The questions that had troubled her were still there, but they no longer felt like burdens. Instead, they felt like invitations to participate in something grand and important: the slow, patient work of building a society based on wisdom and justice. Behind her, Athena remained in the grove, watching over the sacred spring as the moon rose through the olive branches. The goddess smiled, knowing that she had planted seeds of wisdom that would grow and flourish in ways that Sophia could not yet imagine. In the centuries to come, the ideas they had discussed would spread far beyond this single city, inspiring people around the world to experiment with new forms of governance, new ways of organizing communities that honored both individual wisdom and collective needs. But for now, in this peaceful moment between day and night, all was well. The spring continued its gentle bubbling. The night-blooming jasmine began to release its sweet fragrance, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called softly through the darkness, its voice a lullaby that seemed to promise sweet dreams and the dawn of new understanding. The sacred grove settled into the peaceful rhythms of night, while in the city below, Sophia the Weaver fell into the deepest, most restful sleep she had experienced in months, her dreams filled with golden threads, weaving themselves into patterns of harmony and hope. 7 days had passed since Sophia's encounter in the sacred grove, and the seeds of wisdom that Athena had planted were already beginning to sprout in unexpected ways. The young weaver had returned to her loom with renewed purpose, creating tapestries that seemed to capture something essential about community and cooperation. Her neighbors had begun to notice that her patterns held a special quality. They were not merely decorative, but seemed to tell stories about harmony and balance that resonated deep in the heart. Meanwhile, Athena had been busy with work that mortals could not see. In a realm that existed somewhere between the world of humans and the world of pure spirit, she had been tending to her most precious creation, the Library of Living Memory. This was not a library built of stone and wood, filled with scrolls and tablets, though it contained the essence of all such collections that would ever exist. Instead, it was a place where knowledge itself lived and breathed. Welcome, where the wisdom of ages past and future mingled like streams, flowing into a great river of understanding. The Library of Living Memory existed in a space that seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions, yet also felt as intimate and cozy as a favorite reading nook. Its walls, if they could be called walls, were formed from something that looked like crystallized starlight, surfaces that reflected not images, but ideas, concepts, and the deep patterns that connected all knowledge. Books floated gently through the air like luminous birds, their pages rustling with a sound like wind through wheat fields, occasionally settling onto reading tables that materialized whenever someone had need of them. But the most remarkable feature of this library was that it was alive with the presence of every person who had ever sought knowledge, with genuine curiosity and an open heart. Their essence lived on in this place, not as ghosts or spirits, but as the pure distillation of their wonder, their questions, their moments of breakthrough and understanding. Teachers who had dedicated their lives to nurturing young minds, students who had persevered through difficult lessons, scholars who had spent decades pursuing truth. All of them contributed to the warm, welcoming atmosphere that pervaded every corner of this sacred space. Athena moved through the library like a gardener tending her favorite plants, pausing here to encourage a particularly beautiful flower of thought to bloom more fully, stopping there to prune away the dead leaves of misconception that sometimes threaten to choke out new growth. She was particularly attentive to the section that held humanity's growing understanding of how to live together in peace and wisdom. for she knew that in the centuries to come, these ideas would be tested and refined through countless struggles and triumphs. On this evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and rose, Athena sensed the approach of another visitor to her realm. This time, it was not a mortal who climbed the hillside paths, but rather a fellow immortal, the one whose nature was quite different from her own. Apollo, the god of music, poetry, and prophecy, was making his way toward the sacred grove, his golden lyre slung across his shoulder, and his usual radiant smile somewhat dimmed by concern. Apollo was beloved by mortals for his gifts of artistic inspiration and his ability to see glimpses of the future. But he was also known for his quick temper and his tendency to act before thinking things through completely. Where Athena was patient and contemplative, Apollo was passionate and immediate. Where she preferred to work behind the scenes, planting seeds of wisdom that would grow slowly over time, he loved to appear dramatically before mortals, inspiring them to great works of art and poetry. But today, Apollo's usual confidence was shaken. He had been observing the human world from his solar chariot as he drove the sun across the sky, and what he saw troubled him deeply. Wars were breaking out between city-states, brother fighting against brother over resources and territory. The arts that he cherished were being neglected as people focused all their energy on conflict and conquest. Most disturbing of all, he had received visions of a future time when war would become so terrible that entire cities could be destroyed in an instant, when the very survival of human civilization would hang in the balance. As Apollo entered the sacred grove, he found Athena sitting beside her spring as usual, but this time she was not alone. Gathered around her in a perfect circle were 7 owls, each one representing a different aspect of wisdom: patience, understanding, foresight, justice, courage, compassion, and humility. The owls sat perfectly still, their large eyes reflecting the last light of day, and Apollo realized that Athena was conducting some kind of important deliberation. "Sister," Athena looked up, and the owls turned their heads in unison to regard the sun god with their penetrating gaze. "I know," she said gently. "The patterns of conflict are spreading like ripples on the water. But come, sit with us. There is something you need to see." Apollo settled himself on the soft grass, his golden lyre coming to rest against his knee. As soon as he was still, he felt the same profound peace that Athena's presence always brought, but this time it was magnified by the wisdom of the 7 owls and the sacred nature of their gathering. "Show him," Athena said quietly, and suddenly the spring began to glow with a soft, pearl-like radiance. The water's surface became like a window, and Apollo found himself looking not at the present moment, but at a scene from the future. Though whether near or distant, he could not tell. What he saw took his breath away. It was a great city, larger and more magnificent than anything that existed in their current time. Buildings of glass and steel reached toward the sky, like prayers made manifest in stone and metal. People moved through the streets with purpose and energy. But what struck Apollo most was the diversity of these people. Their skin was every shade from palest ivory to deepest ebony. Their clothing reflected traditions from every corner of the world. And their faces showed a contentment and vitality that spoke of lives lived in freedom and dignity. But it was not just the physical beauty of this future city that amazed Apollo. It was the sense of harmony that pervaded everything. He could see that these people had learned to live together despite their differences, to celebrate diversity while working toward common goals. Libraries stood open to all. Museums preserved the art and culture of many civilizations, and schools welcomed children of every background to learn and grow together. "How is this possible?" Apollo whispered, his voice full of wonder. "In my visions, I have seen such terrible conflicts, such destruction. How do humans learn to build something so beautiful?" One of the owls, the one representing foresight, turned its head toward Apollo and spoke in a voice like wind through ancient trees. "They learn through their mistakes," it said, "through the very conflicts that trouble you now. Each war teaches them something about the cost of hatred. Each act of cruelty shows them the value of compassion. Each injustice makes them more determined to create systems that are fair to all." The vision in the spring shifted, and now Apollo saw scenes from many different time periods, like pages being turned in a vast book of history. He saw the people of Sophia's city learning to govern themselves through trial and error, sometimes making wise decisions and sometimes foolish ones, but gradually accumulating wisdom with each generation. He saw other civilizations around the world making their own discoveries about law, art, science, and philosophy, each contributing unique insights to humanity's growing understanding. But he also saw darker times, periods when fear and hatred seemed to triumph, when progress was reversed and knowledge was lost. He saw libraries burned, teachers silenced, and entire populations forced to flee their homes. These scenes made Apollo's heart ache, and he looked questioningly at Athena. "Why do you show me these terrible things?" he asked. "How can you bear to watch such suffering?" Athena's expression was infinitely compassionate, but also resolute. "Because, my dear brother, you cannot understand the light without acknowledging the darkness. The beautiful future city you saw first, it exists precisely because humans learn from their darkest moments. When they see the consequences of hatred and division, they become more committed to building something better." The owl, representing patience, spoke next, its voice calm and soothing. "Wisdom is not learned quickly or easily. It requires experience, reflection, and often great suffering. But each lesson learned becomes part of the foundation for the next generation's understanding." Apollo watched as the visions continued to unfold, showing him how knowledge was preserved even in the darkest times. He saw scribes hiding precious manuscripts, teachers passing on lessons in secret, artists creating works that carried important truths disguised as entertainment. He saw how ideas could travel across vast distances and survive for centuries, waiting for the right moment to bloom again in new minds and hearts. "Your role in this great unfolding is more important than you know," Athena told him. the arts you inspire, music, poetry, drama. These carry wisdom in ways that direct teaching cannot. A song can plant an idea in someone's heart that will grow there for years before they even realize it. A poem can help someone see beauty in the midst of ugliness, giving them hope to continue working for something better. The owl, representing understanding, bobbed its head in agreement. Stories and songs reach parts of the human soul that logic and argument cannot touch. They make people feel truths in their bones, not just understand them in their minds. As if to demonstrate this point, the spring showed Apollo a scene from ancient times when traveling bards would visit villages and towns, sharing stories and songs around evening fires. He saw how these performances were not mere entertainment, but vital ways of preserving history, teaching moral lessons, and binding communities together through shared cultural experiences. "Watch closely," Athena said, and Apollo saw one particular bard, an old man with a voice still strong despite his advanced years. The bard was telling the story of a great war, but he was not glorifying violence or encouraging his listeners to seek revenge against their enemies. Instead, he was weaving a tale that showed the true cost of conflict: the mothers who lost sons, the children who grew up without fathers, the fields left untended while men fought battles that solved nothing. The people gathered around the fire, listened with rapt attention, and Apollo could see how the story was working on their hearts and minds. They were beginning to understand that strength lay not in the ability to defeat others, but in the wisdom to find solutions that benefited everyone. The bard's words were planting seeds that would influence how these people treated their neighbors, how they raised their children, and how they responded to conflicts in their own lives. This is how change really happens, the owl, representing compassion, explained. Not through force or command, but through the gradual transformation of hearts and minds. One story at a time, one song at a time, one moment of beauty at a time. Apollo felt his earlier despair beginning to lift, replaced by a new understanding of his purpose. He had always loved inspiring humans to create beautiful things, but now he could see that his work was part of something much larger, a vast, patient effort to help humanity grow in wisdom and compassion. "What can I do?" he asked Athena. "How can I better serve this great work?" The goddess smiled, and all 7 owls rustled their feathers in what sounded almost like applause. "Continue to inspire," she said, "but remember that the most powerful art comes not from ego or the desire for fame, but from genuine love for humanity and hope for their future. Encourage the artists and poets to tell stories that show people their highest possibilities, not just their current struggles." The owl, representing courage, spoke up. "Help them find the bravery to dream of better worlds even when the present seems dark. Give them the strength to keep creating even when their work is not immediately appreciated or understood." "And remember," added the owl, representing humility, "that your role is to serve, not to control. Plant the seeds and trust in the intelligence and goodness of human nature to make them grow." As the night deepened The owls began to fade back into the spirit realm from which they had come, but their wisdom lingered in the air like the scent of night-blooming flowers. Apollo felt profoundly changed by what he had witnessed. His understanding of his own purpose expanded and deepened. "There is one more thing I must show you," Athena said, as the last owl disappeared. The spring glowed again, and this time Apollo saw something that made his heart leap with joy. It was a scene from the far future, in that same beautiful city he had seen before, in a great concert hall filled with people of all ages and backgrounds. An orchestra was performing a piece of music that seemed to capture everything they had been discussing: the struggles and triumphs of human civilization, the slow growth of wisdom, the eternal hope for peace and understanding. But what moved Apollo most was not just the beauty of the music, but the faces of the people listening. Their expressions showed that they understood what they were hearing, that the music was speaking to them about their own history and their shared humanity. Children sat next to elderly people, all equally transported by the power of art to communicate truths that went beyond words. "Your inspiration lives on," Athena said softly. "Every time someone is moved by beauty to become a little more kind, a little more wise, a little more hopeful, that is your gift working in the world." Apollo wiped tears from his eyes, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he had seen. "How long will it take?" he asked. "How long before humans create this beautiful future?" "Time moves differently for us than for them," Athena replied. "What seems like eons to us is but moments in the great story of existence. And remember, the journey is as important as the destination. Every generation that learns to be a little more wise, a little more compassionate, is already living in that beautiful future, at least partially." As Apollo prepared to leave the grove, he felt lighter than he had in centuries. The burden of worry about human conflicts had been replaced by an understanding of his role in something magnificent and eternal. He would continue to inspire artists and poets, but now he would do so with a deeper sense of purpose and patience. "Thank you, sister," he said to Athena, embracing her gently. "I understand now why you spend so much time contemplating rather than acting directly. Wisdom truly does require patience." Athena smiled. "And I am reminded through your passion why inspiration and beauty are so essential to the growth of wisdom. We each have our part to play in this great symphony." As Apollo departed, transforming into pure light and streaming away across the star-filled sky, Athena remained beside her spring. The library of living memory continued its quiet work all around her, preserving every moment of breakthrough and understanding, every act of kindness and courage, every work of art that help humans see themselves and each other more clearly. The goddess closed her eyes and let her consciousness expand, touching gently on the minds of humans all across the world. In one place, a teacher was patiently explaining a difficult concept to a struggling student. In another, an artist was working late into the night, driven by a vision of beauty that demanded expression. Somewhere else, a group of neighbors who had been arguing were beginning to listen to each other with new respect and understanding. Each of these small moments was a thread in the vast tapestry of human development, and Athena felt deep satisfaction in knowing that the pattern was gradually becoming more beautiful, more complex, and more harmonious with each passing day. The work was far from finished. Indeed, it would never truly be finished, for growth and learning were eternal processes. But every step forward, no matter how small, the future was bright with promise, and every gentle breath of wind through the olive leaves seemed to whisper of wonderful things to come. Chapter 3: The Garden of Growing Hearts. The moon had completed 2 full cycles since Apollo's visit to the sacred grove, and the goddess Athena had noticed something beautiful beginning to happen in the world of mortals. The seeds of wisdom that she had been planting so patiently were starting to sprout in the most unexpected places, creating connections between people and communities that stretched far beyond the borders of any single city or kingdom. The future was bright with promise, and every gentle breath of wind through the olive leaves seemed to whisper of wonderful things to come. Chapter 3: The Garden of Growing Hearts. The moon had completed 2 full cycles since Apollo's visit to the sacred grove, and the goddess Athena had noticed something beautiful beginning to happen in the world of mortals. The seeds of wisdom that she had been planting so patiently were starting to sprout in the most unexpected places, creating connections between people and communities that stretched far beyond the borders of any single city or kingdom. In her timeless realm, Athena had been cultivating a new sanctuary, the Garden of Growing Hearts. This was a place where the emotional and spiritual development of humanity could be nurtured with the same care that a master gardener might give to rare and precious flowers. Unlike the library of living memory, which preserved knowledge and understanding, the Garden of Growing Hearts was dedicated to the cultivation of compassion, empathy, and the deep bonds of love that connected all living beings. The garden existed in a space that seemed to breathe with life itself. Here, plants from every corner of the earth and from realms beyond mortal knowledge grew together in perfect harmony. Roses that bloomed in colors that had no names, intertwined with vines bearing fruit that tasted of laughter and hope. Trees whose leaves changed color not with the seasons, but with the emotions of those who walked beneath them, created a living canopy that reflected the inner weather of every heart that entered this sanctuary. Paths through the garden were made not of stone or earth, but of something that felt soft and warm beneath bare feet, perhaps woven from the dreams of sleeping children or the gentle thoughts of lovers walking hand in hand. These paths had a peculiar quality. They led each visitor exactly where they needed to go, whether they knew their destination or not. Someone seeking comfort after loss might find themselves beside a quiet pool where lotus flowers bloomed eternal and peaceful. A person struggling with anger might discover a grove where wind chimes made of crystallized forgiveness sang gentle melodies that gradually soothed away all resentment. At the heart of the garden grew the tree of understanding, an ancient being whose roots reached deep into the very essence of existence, and whose branches stretched so high They seemed to touch the stars themselves. This tree bore no ordinary fruit, but instead produced moments of perfect clarity. Those precious instances when someone suddenly understood, not just with their mind, but with their entire being, what it meant to love unconditionally, to forgive completely, or to see the divine spark that lived within every creature. Athena spent much of her time in this garden, tending to the delicate work of nurturing human.